our speakers. So the first speaker that will be Professor Dr. Mehdi Solhi from Turkey. Right. Okay. So everybody, please welcome Professor Dr. Mehdi. Could I pronounce wrong, right or wrong?
No, that's
Professor,
fine. Yeah, you can call Mehdi, okay?
Mehdi, right?
Yes.
Okay, Professor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Let me introduce our professor a little bit short profile. Professor Dr. Mehdi has a doctorate degree in English language education from Istanbul University from Turkey. He's assistant professor in the Department of English Language Teaching at Istanbul Medipol University. His research interests include applied linguistics, teaching English as an international language, educational psychology, coursebook evaluation, and teaching writing. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Professor Dr. Mehdi again, please?
Hello again.
Yes.
Shall I start?
Or maybe before we start, shall we take a photo together first? Ajahn Vanchana, would you please help me?
Yes, it's my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Ka. Okay.
1, 2, 3. One more, please. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Now I'm going to share my screen, then I can get started. Okay, now I think you can see my screen, right?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, so
can I say something before starting your session?
Yeah, hello. Hello.
Yeah,
Hello,
yes.
hello. Very good afternoon from Thailand. What time is it now in Turkey, sir?
It's now 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, 9 a.m. Yeah, okay. Okay, different time. So,
Yes.
so thank you very so much, sir, for spending your valuable time being with us online.
Pleasure.
But I highly hope to have you in person on site at our campus very soon. Everyone, please be informed that I met Professor Mehdi in Turkey at his university. That is Istanbul Medipol University. Last 2 months. Last month, he's very kind. All right, he kindly accepted my paper to present at his wonderful conference. At that conference, there were a lot of well-known scholars coming to present academic and research papers. Thank you very so much, Professor Mehdi, for giving us a good opportunity to present our paper at your university. In return,
thank you.
We highly hope to have your paper presented at our university very soon. Normally, we Ph.D. program in ELT having an annual conference, and last year was the first conference, and we are planning to have the second ELT symposium. I think May or March or April. So by the time you'll be invited to be our invited speakers and present some papers, if the situation of COVID it's getting better, you'll be invited for sure on site with us at Buriram Rajabhat University. All right, today we are really lucky to have Professor Mehdi, and I think in the future I will take you all, my PhD student, to visit Professor Mehdi at his university. His university is very beautiful and very big, very big. So I would like to invite all of you. And next time, I think Professor Mehdi, he also holding his conference every year. So next year, if we are lucky enough, and we will come and visit him at his university. Would you like to visit him อาจารย์ตั๊กตริยาอาจารย์วันชนะ yes also my friend from Myanmar on Teso we are going to visit Professor Mehdi in Turkey next time. Okay, now it's good time for us to officially welcome our visiting professor, and thank you so much once again on behalf of BRU President. She just informed me that today professor from Istanbul Medipol University coming to deliver a special talk. He just asked me to deliver her thankful message to Professor Mehdi. All right, and I would like to invite all of you, please join me in giving a big round of applause to express our sincere thanks to our visiting professor today. Thank you very so much. And now it's your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your nice words, and it was great having you here in Istanbul. And we are planning to, as you said, and we are planning to organize a second conference of, and psychology for language teachers and learners, next year as well. So yeah, we are of course and looking forward to meeting you all in Istanbul. And thank you so much for your invitation and for having me here to talk the academic writing. So today I'm going to actually and first then define what academic writing is. Then I'm going to talk about the different types of academic writing. Then I'm going to talk about some features of academic writing, and the last to finish my presentation talking about academic writing. So let's just briefly talk about what academic writing is. Normally when we just talk about academic writing, so we normally think like assignments to some projects at university. At the same time, when we talk about academic writing, we're talking about some like scholarly and productions, and we want to, consider having our papers published, at a journal. So this is a type of academic writing as well. So we have got two different types of academic writing, if you want to, and generalize them. So the first one, as I told you, and refers to a type of writing that we do at school, at university, and for a specific course that we have. So the purpose of such kind of academic writing is to, to indicate, to demonstrate and learning, what you know about something. So we write some projects. And so, but the second type of academic writing, so that is common, and when it comes to production, producing some academic, scholarly papers, so is the scholarly academic writing. So this is the second type of academic writing. So, and normally we can have our paper, so being considered like to be published at a journal, or it can be a book chapter, or even developing a book actually is a type of academic writing. So there's some of the features, some of the characteristics of academic writing, and we're going to talk about like 7 of them today, very briefly, and I'm going to show you some examples. And because the topic is not just talking about the theoretical things, at the same time we are going to connect the theory to the practical, and the side of the academic writing. So the first characteristic of academic writing is that normally academic writing is structured. So we have got different parts of like a paper, or we have got different parts of an academic writing. So, and when it comes to students' academic writing, normally we are all familiar with different types of essay or paragraph writing. Normally at university, and like at Medipol University, and we have got English preparatory school, where students learn how to write, so paragraphs. At the same time, they learn how to write essays. So the purpose of such kind of student writing, as I told you, is to demonstrate learning. So students need to write, for example, an introduction, then the body section, and the concluding paragraph. So normally such kind of student writing has got 3 sections. So when it comes to the body section, normally we have got like 2 or 3 paragraphs. So, but in the case of scholarly academic writing, when we talk about like papers that would be published at a journal. So normally the style, I mean, the structure is different. So different journals have got different styles of, and writing. So, and I mean, the format that they have. So it's likely to be different. But normally we have got the introduction, literature review, then method, like the result and the discussion and conclusion. So these are the different parts of like academic writing, but it depends whether the writing is, qualitative or quantitative. So because some parts of the, and some academic writing, scholarly academic writing, so are likely to be different depending on the journal, as I said. Second feature of academic writing is that, so it's evidenced. So while writing academic writing, we need to refer to the facts, reasons, examples, and we need to give some statistics. At the same time, we need to cite and some people's work. So for example, here, and you can see an example. And in this type of, for example, in this example, and like we have got some statistical, and evidence. Like here, it talks about like foreign language learning boredom. It's one of the most prevalent and emotional, and states of language learners. So it is not just a school that even at university level, so students feel bored. I mean, a high level of boredom is something that is reported at schools in the world. So according to some studies, like 40% of university students and like reported, being bored in the class. So, and 20% of them find and most of the lectures boring. So these are such kind of statistical things and reporting and the level of boredom at school. At the same time, when we have got some explanations, like for example, what academic, like what foreign language learning boredom is, what are the, and the characteristics of, such kind of boredom by just like, and here it says watching the clock and being drowsy and resting head on hand. So at the same time, these are some kind of like evidence, like can be, and for example, again, at the same, if you look at the first sentence here, it just says that such kind of boredom and manifests itself in a variety of behavioral boredom coping strategies. Again, there are some references that have been used and to indicate actually and the phenomenon. I'm going to talk about May. I have underlined it. So, and because it's also a type of characteristic of academic writing, and when to just use May. And then, so evidence. So as I told you, we need to talk about the facts, reasons, like when we say because of something. So this is something that is evidenced. Yes. Would you like to say something? I just heard. Okay, someone. So examples and are also important. We need to use some examples to indicate and to support the ideas that we have, statistical things and the citations I told you. In the case of critical, I mean, this is one of the features of, again, academic writing, and academic writing needs to be critical. The ideas and the information in the paper so need to be evaluated so critically. And we need to make some critical judgments about them. So let's just have a look at the example. And again, critical actual evaluation and means that so, and we need to, as I told you, make some critical judgments about the results of something, and not to report something. We need to actually explain and the grounding for something, and the reason why you conduct a study, for example, and need to be critically and explained. For example, here says that despite the number of studies on the role of teacher characteristics on, like, for example, and like such as teacher enthusiasm, blah 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 blah, on students and foreign language enjoyment, like the present study need to be the first to investigate. So we need to actually talk about the lack, and we need to critically talk about the need for this study and the justification for this study. And this is the critical side of academic writing. Thus, apparently, like for example, and these are some of the key terms that can be used and to critically and so expand and the ideas that are explained in the critical writing. So given that there is a scarcity of research, so and I mean, because of lack of study, so on this type of study, so I decided to do something. We decided to do something. So it's kind of critical. So we need to make some justification, not to directly, for example, and express something. So the grounding for expressing something and justifications are really important. The second, actually, and the next feature of academic writing is that it must be precise. The language needs to be clear and reader-friendly. We should avoid lots of difficult terminologies like that we have. So if you're going to use some terminologies, and I mean academic terminologies, that's better to define them, not to just, for example, take it for granted, saying that students all or the readers all know what that is. So we have to explain the academic writing, so we must make it precise. For example, here it says being identified as the emotion that fuels the second language learning process and to boost the performance in second language learning. Enjoyment is defined. Again, we said being identified, enjoyment is defined. And we also talked about, we said that Lee et al. Also defined, for example, enjoyment in this way. And then, for example, and we say foreign language enjoyment. So there's, I think, background noise coming. So yeah, foreign language enjoyment, for example, and we say that as conceptualized by some, scholars. So the language actually needs to be clear. We first then need to define the difficult terminologies, or we have to make them reader friendly. This is something that is called and precise and academic writing. When it comes to the balance, this is one more characteristic of academic writing. We have to take all sides of the issues into consideration. So it means that we need to avoid being biased. So there's a kind of safety and need for safety control of safety control of the words. So the claims need to be well supported. The length of the different parts of the paper need to be balanced as well. Let me just show you some examples. And if you're not sure about something, and that's a good idea not to just directly report that blah blah and just, is blah blah. Is there such kind of language? Maybe that's a good idea to use, like, for example, apparently, it seems that, so seemingly, it's evident that, it means that's clear that, so the results indicate that, so clearly. Such kind of language can, make it possible for us for the readers to realize that. So, and some other, sides are also taken into consideration. So we shouldn't just make it so direct. I mean, so even when it comes to the qualitative studies, so because sometimes we need such qualitative studies tend to be kind of subjective, although and we shouldn't forget that the nature of actual studies need to be objective. But sometimes these studies the qualitative studies tend to be subjective. So in order to avoid the subjectivity of the language, in order to just say that the course books are not effective in terms of like indicating and the authenticity. So we need to say that the course books seem to be incapable of providing like authentic content to the learners. So we have to use some kind of terminologies to be on the safe side of the language, while reporting not to be too biased. Okay, this is something that we need to be careful about. So there are some examples again I have written for you. I just talked about the objectivity of the academic writing. So when we just write, something, we need to try to be as objective as possible, not to just say that, for example, because of the authors, because of the setting, and something is going to be something. And we need to actually, as I told you, in qualitative research, so when there's no statistical, and evaluation available, so language tends to be subjective. For example, in coursebook evaluation, it's a type of qualitative research. So I just gave you the example of like, you know, being and as objective as possible, although the nature of such kind of studies, I mean, the coursebook evaluation is likely to be subjective, but we need to make it objective by paying attention to such kind of like details. So I gave you the example of like, you know, and subjectivity. And for example, and as I told you, when it comes to qualitative studies and so on, we need to make it like seem to, you know, I just talked about, you know, and some of the hedges that we need to and use like kind of, sort of, although such kind of words are not academic words, but we need to make them formal by just making like somewhat. Instead of saying kind of, to make the language actually and less biased. I'm talking about the balanced feature of you know, academic writing. So I just talked about the objectivity of the writing, so and not to begin biased and not to just for example and because of a country or because of some authors and we make some decisions. We need to evaluate the paper based on the objectivity and of the topic. So at the same time, the academic writing needs to be formal. And we need to avoid like abbreviations instead of saying it'll be considered. We need to say it will be considered. So you know, I'm talking about the short forms of the words and they need to be avoided. If we're going to use the acronyms, at firstly, we need to define the, you know, the full title, then we use the acronym. So the colloquial language needs to be avoided. We need to make it as formal as possible. So in writing. So these are actually some of the characteristics of academic writing. I just talked about them, the 7 features of academic writing. But there are some myths about academic writing. I mean, not true, you know, and pieces of information. I mean, not true and knowledge that we have about academic writing. For example, and some people feel like, so academic writing starts with like introduction, then we write for example, and the review of literature of the paper, then we write the methodology and the results and conclusion and discussion and conclusion. And in this way, we have to follow the academic, you know, the steps in academic writing. But we shouldn't forget that it's not like something to be like, you know, written from number 1 to number 5. While writing, for example, in the discussion, maybe we can come back to the introduction and we revise lots of things. Maybe that's why in academic writing, sometimes we change the title of the thesis. I mean, if you're writing a doctorate dissertation, maybe after a year, so we decide to change the title of the thesis. So depending on the content of the study. So it is something actually and flexible, and maybe we can just come to the beginning and we can go back to the like literature review and discussion. So we don't just write, I mean, we don't finish the first stage to go to the second. They're all interrelated. So the second wrong information, I mean, knowledge, that perception that we have about academic writing is that, so academic writing starts, you know, when they have everything figured out. So we don't actually start when everything is okay. At the same time, while, for example, in collecting data from the participants, and we can, for example, develop some ideas and to write the discussion. I mean, conclusion of the thesis, because normally there's research questions and are based on some of the hypotheses that we have. So, and based on such kind of things, and we can try to find some relevant literature review and, I mean, papers from different scholars. We can summarize them to make to connect the ideas to the potential findings at the end of the paper. I mean, at the same time, while correcting data, we can, like, for example, write the literature review, and we can write the, you know, and the discussion section of the paper. This is not something that we need to first collect the data, then to get started doing something. So, or we need to actually develop a research question in order to be able to do something. So, and all of these stages, I mean, and can be conducted simultaneously. Some people just feel like grammar is everything. If the grammar of your language is okay, so that's academic enough. But that's not true. And at the same time, and we have to pay attention to not just the the linguistic competence, I mean, competency of the paper. At the same time, we have to take into consideration the cohesion and coherence, I mean, and how critical your paper has been written. So the range of the vocabulary, academic vocabulary, and cohesion and coherence are really important. And I mean, to the extent the ideas, there are ties and connections that are present in the paper. At the same time, the connectedness, the whole connection that exists in the paper. So so it is not just grammar that and makes our paper high quality. At the same time, some people feel like they're only in 5. Like if you're talking about the student academic writing, they're only in like 5 or 3 key important sections of the parts of the academic writing, and normally, and which is we feel like that's the start with introduction, so the body and conclusion. If you're talking about student writing, but it depends. Actually, it depends to the type of the essay that we write. If you're talking about student writing, and sometimes we've got like comparison essay, opinion essay, argumentative essay, classification essay, problem solving essay. So we are likely to have different types of formats of writing. So when it comes to academic and scholarly and academic writing, again, that's the same thing. So different people have got, I mean, different journals have got their own formats of writing. Today, I think one of the speakers is going to talk about the publications in the journal. So I don't want to talk about this now. That's beyond the scope of this presentation. But and I think such kind of things would be discussed there. I mean, the format of the journal and the things that the author or the authors need to pay attention to when they would like to consider having their paper published in a journal. So again, and never use I language. This is, again, there's a kind of misconception about academic writing, and we sometimes we ask the learners not to write I language. I mean, not to say I mostly, but in academic writing, it is possible to use the I language to some extent. If you're a group of people conducting this study, so in academic writing, if you look at the scholarly papers, and you can find, for example, we language a lot. If there's a group of scholars and I mean researchers who have conducted this study, so it's possible to find we language a lot. We conducted this study, we decided to do this. So we is more common than I language. Of course, that is true, but in academic writing, we can also use I language to some extent. So it doesn't mean that always we have to use the passive voice. It is possible to use I language, but we shouldn't use it, extensively. So these are actually the 5, and so the methods of. And I just talked about the definition, the types of academic writing, and different characteristics of academic writing. And there are some like wrong piece of information that we know about academic writing. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. I try to make it concise and to manage the time more effectively. So the 7 features of academic writing are important because in this session, I just gave general information about academic writing. When it comes to, again, and to the theoretical, I mean, and the practical side, I try to, and indicate some examples of how to implement it. And I can share the PowerPoint presentation with you, and if you are willing. Okay, that's the end of my talk. If you have got any questions or if you have got any comments, and feel free say so.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mehdi, for sharing your valuable insights of academic writing from theory to practice. So, anyone please join me to ask, or if you like to ask the question, please feel free.
This is, I would say that his talk is very concise and very practical, okay? But I would like to have his opinions and suggestions. What are do's? What are don'ts? All right? What are do? What are don'ts? Mean do with S, do's and don'ts when we are writing academic messages, academic papers. Do's and don'ts. Would you please suggest us? Do when should do. Don't mean should avoid doing so, just like that, please.
Okay, yeah. Actually, and in this paper, I tried to briefly explain the things that we need to take into consideration while writing an academic paper. If you're talking about having a scholarly academic paper, because as I said at the beginning of the presentation, there are two types of academic papers. You know, the student academic paper and scholarly. I mean, normally the doctorate students, at the same time the educators, and would prefer to focus on scholarly academic paper, to have their work, you know, and published somewhere. I mean, they would consider a journal and to have their paper and published there. So we firstly need to focus on a specific journal if you're going to submit our work to have it published. I mean, based on the formats of the journal, we need to make decision and what to write and what not to write. As I told you, and all of the journals have got their own structure of, like, I mean, formats of writing. So we have to firstly look at the format of the journal, and then decide about, for example, and whether I can consider my paper and, you know, and for being published in this journal or not. So because maybe there are some expectations from the journal, I mean, based on the structure of the journal, that I might have difficulty, you know, and focusing on. So based on the format sometimes, and we avoid and we just, you know, skip some journals. So this is something that we need to pay attention to. At the same time, and when it comes to academic writing, most of the journals would prefer like 8,000 or like lower than 8,000. So I'm talking about the word limit. So depending on such kind of, you know, if our work actually goes beyond 8,000 like words, so sometimes we are asked to you know, reduce the length of the paper. So in some journals, and there are like short research options as well, you don't have to write the full papers to be considered for a high scholarly journals. Sometimes, and they just accept, you know, the journals, I mean, the papers with like 1,000 words. Like some typical examples are for example, Frontiers in Psychology. It's a high quality, you know, journal. I mean, high indexing journal. There are some like short research report options. So by only in 1,000 or 1,500 words, and you can write a research report and you can submit your work there. So I think in the afternoon, I mean, a professor is going to talk about, you know, having a paper published in a journal. I don't want to talk about right now.
Yeah.
So, but we've got different like qualitative and quantitative research. So we don't have to only focus on the statistical sides of these studies, and we can also focus on the qualitative studies as well. I mean, when we say qualitative studies, I'm talking about like course book evaluation at the same time, and normally mixed method studies, and both the qualitative and quantitative you know, methods of conducting studies are taken into consideration. But we can only focus on, for example, the qualitative side of this study. Again, it depends to the journal, and some journals and like focus on only the quantitative and papers to be considered. But when it comes to academic writing, the things that we should do and we shouldn't do. So in the presentation, I just briefly talked about this, but at the same time, and when it comes to the things that we should do, is to maybe and review and look at the actually in the editors list. I mean, list of the editors and the fields of specialization. And because sometimes, and depending on the editors, and maybe and we can and we can just forget about the journal, the expectations that they have, and for considerations. I mean, and at the same time, and some journals are process the submissions very fast. Okay, in a couple of weeks, and you get the answer. But in some journals, it takes like a year maybe to get a response from the journals. I would prefer not to and send my submissions to such kind of journals because so
one more thing you mentioned about grammar point. You said that
yes.
Grammar might not be the main factors to
Yes.
make the quality papers. Could you please explain more about this?
Yeah, one more interesting thing is that when I was at the prep school, English preparatory school at different universities in Istanbul and Istanbul University, Medipol, Medipol University, I realized that normally we have got academic writing. Okay, normally the native speakers of English evaluate the academic writing based on the contents of the paper. But when it comes to the non-native speakers of non-native speaker teachers, and we focus mostly on grammar. I mean, we judge and we make some decisions about the quality of the paper based on the grammar, not the content. But the thing that I realized that my colleagues, I mean, my colleagues from America, from the United States, and from England, they focus mostly on the content of the paper. I mean, academic writing. If the content was fine, they evaluated the paper and so as effectively. So they would just say the paper is great. But so that was the reason there was a discrepancy. I mean, a difference between this course of and the native and non-native speakers of English. I mean, teachers of English language. So at school, I mean, we because of being passed through the process of language learning, we non-native speakers of English mostly focus on grammar. We evaluate the paper and based on the grammar of the paper. So if the grammar is fine, we say, yeah, the paper is great. If the grammar is terrible, so we don't look at the content. So we, as I said, maybe we have passed through the process of learning English in this way. That's why we make decisions about the quality of the paper and with the focus on only the grammar. I mean, the linguistic, and the features of the paper rather than the content.
Yes, very, very good point. I think the question might be coming from our PhD student, Mr. Santa Claus Yuthajak. Okay, one question, $100. Okay, from you. Please ask Professor Mehdi. I think he can answer all questions raised by you. You have plenty of time now.
Good afternoon, Professor. Okay, good afternoon and Merry Christmas. Okay, I'm just finished my small Christmas party in my classroom. That's why I'm wearing the Christmas coat. Okay, I do have one question about your presentation. Okay, among the 7 features of academic writing, okay, which one do you think we should improve first, or we should improve most to make our paper readable among the reader? I mean, they should understand what we are conveying. Yeah, so I think readability is one of the most important things. So which features should be improved most? Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, and by the way, Merry Christmas to you as well. So you talked about the most important features. I think in the journals, and normally the critical evaluation of the content So it's something that is taken for consideration mostly. I talked about the difference between native and non-native instructors of English language and the way they evaluate the papers. When it comes to the journals, I think the first thing that actually they value is the formality. I mean, to the extent the language of the paper is and academic or not. I mean, so the format is something that is taken into consideration mostly. The second one is the critical, I mean, and the critical and evaluation and judgments about the contents. And we shouldn't just, for example, write the literature review one by one. Like, for example, somebody said something, somebody did something, somebody did something. So this is a kind of, and instead of listing the literature review report in this way, we have to make them critical and we have to reflect on them. So, and by just like, expressing or, and making our conclusions and implications, and after findings, instead of just reporting like one study after the other. So when we report a study, and we need to make a conclusion out of it. So it's a critical and so reflection on the actual and on the issue raised here, instead of just, as I told you, and passing one after the other in this study. So critical, I think, evaluation is something that is mostly taken into consideration the conclusion of this study, discussion and conclusion parts of this study. So the final part of this study, I think, is the most important part of this study. So because this is so what? If we cannot critically and reflect on the ideas, I mean, so if we cannot and critically and support our claims, I mean, the findings and the implications stated by the findings, and we wouldn't have a higher chance of, and having our paper published in a high indexing journal. So critical evaluation is something that is important. At the same time, the research questions, because here I didn't talk about the different parts of the academic paper. I only talked about the characteristics of academic paper. If you're talking about the different parts of the academic paper, yeah, we have got the research questions, I mean, that are important. The research questions need to be eye-catchy, they need to be so novel. So in order to just feel the dangerous question of so what? Because if you want to repeat these studies, so I mean, if you would like to duplicate these studies, so maybe sometimes they ask the question, so what? So in order to answer such kind of things, we need to critically and reflect on the ideas. I mean, the findings, so the discussion section of the paper, I think, is the most important part of the paper. And after the research questions. And the language of the formality, I mean, writing, the paper, the academic paper and the thesis in a formal way is also one more thing that we need to take into consideration. So the top two, I can just say, are the formality and the critical and, of writing of the academic writing and academic, like, scholarly paper, let's say. I just connect the ideas to writing and publications, because today one more speaker is going to talk about publication and how to write, how to have a paper published in a good journal.
Any other question from our academic partners, from Ajahn Atikom from Ubon Ratchathani University, and also the professor from Songkhla Rajabhat University as well, from MSW. And I just got a message from our academic partners from Turkey as well. Professor Kave, he just sent me the message, and he want his PhD student to attend this webinar as well. So if you have any question, please ask our Professor Mehdi directly.
By the way, there's a question, I think, in the message box, and saying,
okay,
how critical eyes on voice to make. I think reading is very, firstly, and we need to focus on one specific field of study. For example, over the last 2 years, I have focused on the connection between language and psychology. So I have decided to focus on such kind of papers mostly. And after reading lots of papers, and you find the gaps existing. Because, you know, we cannot work multidisciplinary. I mean, at the same time, and we cannot work on different, you know, on fields of English language education, because there are lots of subfields of English language education. So we have to specifically and focus on one field of study. Like my specialization over the last years, you know, and has been psychology for language teachers and learners. So because I read a lot about boredom, I read a lot, you know, and about like a sense of humor. I mean, the teacher humor in the class. So that's why I know lots of things about such kind of construct. So if I know lots of things about, you know, and such kind of phenomenon, so I would be able to find the gaps existing. So in this way, I formulate my research questions based on the existing gaps. So I think in the reading extensively on a specific topic is something important. You first, and you need to decide about the things that you are interested in. For example, when I read something about the psychology of language learning, I mean, when I read something about humor in the class, I mean, teacher humor, and when I read something about the foreign language enjoyment and teaching enjoyment as well. I mean, these are the new concepts in psycholinguistics. So I enjoy a lot. So when I enjoy a lot, I keep reading. So that's why, and I can identify the existing gaps remaining then to focus on to investigate. So firstly, we need to decide about the topic that we are interested in to read to heavily and read on this have a read about this topic to be able to and to identify the existing and remaining gaps in the literature.
Oh, all right,
Okay.
Professor.
Yes.
Okay. On behalf of the like student ELT PhD student, because we are in the first year student, so we afraid maybe afraid to do some, because we're not good at like academic ones. So would you please motivate us in what way that we have to do it easier?
Yeah, you know,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Yes, Professor Mehdi, you are going to motivate them, but I am going to force them to do something. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, you talked about motivation. Motivation itself is a really interesting and field of study. And we have got some distinguished features like Zoltan Durney, for example, who has done lots of things and for learner motivation. So teacher motivation is a different story. And so motivation actually is really important thing. And you just, because, you know, some of the students are become demotivated, and some students are already immotivated. Demotivated means that they are, at first they were motivated, then they are not. Unmotivated, it means that there's no motivation at all, and maybe only for the purpose of, you know, and getting a job. I know they would like to study English language, like education. That's only instrumental. I mean, motivation. So motivating the student, I can just tell you that, for example, the topic is interesting. I mean, motivation, depending on you know, because your field of study is English language education, right? So when it comes to English language education, it's a very general concept. So my recommendation is specifically and focus on one field of study, for example, and you can specifically focus on writing. Although you have got lots of theoretical things, I mean, the courses that you study at school, at university. So my recommendation is focusing on one specific field of study, like writing. If you're interested in applied linguistics, and you can focus on, for example, in a specific skill of language education. If you're interested in, for example, in discourse, you can focus on discourse analysis things. And if you're interested in psychological things, I mean, the associations between psychology and language teaching, and you can focus on psycholinguistics. I mean, and there, because, you know, the topics of psycholinguistics are really nice, and it talks about psychology. At the same time, it talks about language education. So it gives lots of information about, like, you know, and like motivating the learners, and how to manage the class when students feel tired, bored, and how to use the sense of humor effectively in the class. I mean, and what about the learner, like, enjoyment? What are the things that make students feel happy in the class? Learner enjoyment. Because, you know, when we look at the history of, you know, and the studies on the psychology of language education, we only have the studies focusing on anxiety. I mean, negative emotions, anxiety, stress, burnout. But over the last years, with the rise of positive psychology, so we have, like, you know, the focus has been given to positive emotions, mostly enjoyment, motivation, like, for example, and great is a new concept. So my purpose actually is that, so you need to, if you find the things that you are willing to read, you would enjoy reading. So the foreign language enjoyment is really important. If you cannot enjoy reading a text, so it means that, so this is not something that you are interested in. My recommendation is to finding a field of study, I mean, subfield of study in English language education that you are interested in. So, and you can read about psychology, I mean, psychology of language education. So this kind of things can keep the students motivated. And in this way, you can formulate, you know, and you can think of the research questions that you would have in the future for conducting your doctorate. So reading, I think reading is a mother of skills, always we say. And reading on a specific topic is something that is always, you know, I recommend. In my free time, I read papers a lot, so to keep my knowledge updated about some topics at the same time, and to identify the existing gaps, you know, in literature to work on.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your advice and motivate us.
My pleasure.
Any questions so far from our classmate, please?
I think we are going to have a question from Professor Kaveh from Istanbul University, Turkey. He just attended this webinar. Please, Professor Kaveh.
Okay, thank you very much. Dear doctor, you know, English is a foreign language for us, and it is sometimes demanding and, let's say, daunting when you are writing in a foreign language. Do you have any recipe for, let's say, new researchers when they are coming to that field, how they should improve, what strategies he or she should follow in order to, let's say, boost his or her writing skills in the field and being able to publish as well?
Thank you, Kaveh. Actually, and I know Kaveh. Kaveh is a friend of mine from Istanbul. Okay, so you mentioned actually something important, how to just, you know, improve their academic reading and writing skills. My recommendation is, when you read an academic paper, normally, and I would prefer to choose scholarly papers. I mean, the papers and published in high indexing journals. After, for example, and choosing the topic that I'm interested in, like motivation, for example, or if I'm interested to, like, read a paper on like boredom, you know, foreign language learning boredom. So first I would try to find scholarly papers. You know, while reading scholarly papers, I try to pay attention to, for example, some details. I highlight the critical, you know, and statements that they use, and to support some claims and ideas. So I look at the way they form sentences. So I highlight, I take notes a lot in the margins of the papers. And because normally when we read, we forget the details. So my recommendation is not just to looking at the contents, but to look at the format of writing papers. I mean, the terminologies that they use to support some claims, and how they connect the ideas to the next, for example, and paper that they report in the literature review. I look at the transition of ideas. I mean, how they use some linkers, and how they move and from one topic to the next. Because as I told you, when we look at the students' papers and they just put the literature review, I mean, reports one after the other. So without critically and connecting and making the transition smooth. So between the contents, between the topics actually in the literature review section. So when it comes to conclusion, like I read the conclusion carefully and discussion as well, but try to look at some of the, for example, the formats. I mean, some of the terminologies that they would prefer to use while supporting their claims. I mean, I analyze the paper. I evaluate the content. Yeah, I learned something actually new about the findings, about, something actually that I'm interested in. But at the same time, I look at the format of academic writing. So, and how critical they reflect the ideas. And I just talked about, the different, for example, and the features of academic writing. So I just look at, for example, and how evidenced academic writing is, and does it give like statistical, and findings and does it like report, for example, and and the language in a precise way, how the author like defines the key term. I mean, precise side of the paper we talked about. Is it like, biased or not? I'm talking about the balanced. So does it just talk about like a specific country? What about some examples from other countries? This is the balanced, and feature of academic writing. So I pay attention to lots of details, not to the content. I mean, knowledge of the paper. So sometimes I read the paper a couple of times, because as I told you, my purpose is not to just look at the content, but to look at the way the paper is reported. So these are some of the recommendations that I have for the students who would like to improve their academic writing.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Any more questions? Okay. So if you don't have any questions further, so we will come up to the end of this session with our professor, Dr. Mehdi. Okay. Now it's time to so today we enjoy very much for your sharing valuable things today with the academic writing. Okay. Let me invite Associate Professor Dr. Akraponnirmaihom, Faculty Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences, and the Chairman of ELT Ph.D. program to give a thankful message for our guest speaker in the first session of in the afternoon, please.
Professor, we don't have your voice. So.
Thank you, Miss MC Ajahn Rosamond, once again for your wonderful responsibilities. All right, I just got a message directly from my university president, that is Associate Professor Marini, and whatever we have done here, I normally keeps her a report, and she just sent back the message, and she would like to invite Professor Mehdi and Professor Keva, all right, for attending our international conference that will be taking place on 15 February next year. She would like to invite both of you and your student as well to attend and present the papers at our international conference that's we call NIRC. It's now it's 6th time already. We normally have the international conference every year like this. So we will send you the official invitation once again, and we highly hope to see you in person on site at our campus. If you don't come, we will go visit you at your university, that is Istanbul Medipol University and also Istanbul University. Don't get confused. There are two Istanbul University in Istanbul city. The first one is Istanbul University that belong to is a public university, belong to Professor Keva. And that one is it's a private university, that is Istanbul Medipol University, that's belong to Professor Mehdi, different one, but also it's very big. So if you don't come, we will come and visit you. All right. Okay. And today, yeah, your talks are very insightful, very informative, and of course very practical and applicable to current study of my students. If the chance provided, we will have you with us once again. And by the time, I think a lot of questions will raised by my students, all right, for sure. So regarding the invited speakers PowerPoint, this will be sent to you all later on after this webinar. Thank you, Professor Mehdi, for giving us your PowerPoint. All right. And on behalf of Buriram Rajabhat University, the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Buriram Rajabhat University, and our Ph.D. ELT program, I would like to thank you very so much, my PhD student and our academic partners from different universities. Of course, my sincere thanks go to Professor Kave from Istanbul University and his students for attending this webinar. And we highly hope to have you all once again with us to attend other different webinars. Last but not least, I would like to invite all of you, please join me in giving a big round of applause to our invited speaker, Professor Mehdi from Istanbul Medipol University. Thank you very so much for your academic contribution, sir. Now it's good time for us to say goodbye, and please allow me to declare the webinar officially closed. Thank you so much. Keep in touch and stay healthy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for having me here. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. So this is the first speaker in the afternoon session. So we have another speaker as well for Professor Dr. Tariq Ayaz. I'm not sure that I'm pronounced right or wrong. It's okay. From Saudi Arabia. So maybe we will have a break first, and then we come back 15 minutes because we will start at 2:15, right? Yes. Professor?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then after that, after break, we will have another speaker, and then we will invite the dean as well to officially welcome our next speaker. Enjoy your break, and then we come back.
See you after.
Thank you.
Yeah, 10 minutes. Yeah, thank you.